Okay. Right. So we are now recording. So if there's anybody in the meeting that doesn't want their image to appear on the video, please switch your video off now. We will record the meeting to post on YouTube. Okay, so welcome to Fiction Fix, and I'm just about to get started. Okay. Could I just say a few sort of housekeeping things? Could you all please mute yourself during the meetings? I will give you verbal cues, and then we are now live streaming to Facebook, and we are now recording. Anybody that arrives late will be muted on entry for minimal disturbance. So that's that. Yep, that's done. So, hello everybody, and welcome to the November 21 edition of Fiction Fix Online. And this event is being live streamed to the Finger on the Pulse, which is the Facebook group for Fiction Fix Online. And the Zoom video will be posted afterwards on my Helen Claire Gould channel on YouTube. So please do subscribe and point all your friends to it. And if you wish to join the Finger on the Pulse, please request to do so. There are a few rules to review and some questions to answer, but the group is both for readers and listeners. At our Fiction Fix live events, there was always a books table. Now, we can't do that exactly with Fiction Fix Online, but basically, we use the chat box to put details in, and then if you've got a website, do include that along with the link to your ebook and or to the seller for your print version. Prices would be helpful, an ISBN or ASIN if you have it, and on Amazon Kindle, the ASIN should take readers straight to the book. But this can be done at the end or at any time during the show while you're not reading. And I will post all of that information with the live stream and video or in the comments below it. This is for the people who are reading today. And if Josephine, you'll get a chance to do that next time when you come on and a reading. So now please, everybody, could you unmute, because we need your hands to do some work. So Colin is going to lead the way this afternoon with the latest instalment of his ongoing fantasy series. So will you please welcome back to the mic Colin A Brett and Mylo.
Thank you. A little recap after the last episode. Mylo and his would-be girlfriend Callie were attacked by 3 orcs in the middle of the woods as the snow started falling. Mylo just managed to survive and save the life of Callie and her soldier companion, Sergeant Astle. They managed to reach safety with an old lady who lives in a cottage in the woods. And we pick up there. Goodwife Agnes Bamber settled back into the wooden rocking chair that her husband had made many years ago. She had spent over an hour tending the soldier's injuries and had laid on poultices made from her grandmother's recipes to draw the infection and poisons from the orc weapons that had worsened the wounds. Her reward had been a faint smile from the soldier, who closed his eyes and slept in front of the fire. Now, as she lit a clay pipe and drew heavily on the scented smoke, she looked over the children in front of her. The thinking of them as children was wrong, reflected Agnes, as they told their stories. Between them, they had seen more violence in the last few days than she herself had seen or heard of since her husband had passed away a year before Mylo was born. The old woman remembered the birth with some pride. While Mylo's mother had been a strong and healthy woman, and the boy had been difficult since the moment he was conceived. The pregnancy was more difficult and the birth more arduous than any Goody Bamber had guided in all her years. She had kept half an eye on young Mylo in the years since, and was proud that the boy had grown into such a smart young man. and this despite being raised by that dishonest buffoon Davidov Germes. The girl was a pretty young thing, though rather dishevelled after her ordeal in the woods, and of course her selfless decision to rip strips from her dress to bandage the soldier's wounds, a decision that had helped save the man's life. No wonder young Mylo kept glancing across at the girl. Yes, there's definitely something there, thought Goody Bamba. Perhaps I could help it along a bit. It wouldn't be the first time. She was brought back to her senses when Mylo said, "And I should ride back to the village tonight." Callie gasped and Mylo looked over at her. "Your father needs to know you're safe, and my people need to know there are raiders in the woods less than a day's march away." Callie wanted to scream at Mylo. He couldn't risk himself. Not again, not for her. But she forced herself to remain calm. "Mylo, that's madness. How many orcs could still be out there? You can't outride them all. It's pitch dark out there, and there was already a foot of snow on the ground as we arrived here." She paused and reached out to take his right hand, which, despite his best efforts at washing, was still stained with orc blood, and Callie had to stifle a grimace as she gripped his hand. In a quieter voice, she said, "You've already been a hero once tonight. You don't need to do it again," she finished in a whisper. "You've already proved you're no coward." Mylo floundered, but still held tight to Callie's hand and looked at Goody Bamba. "Goody, tell her." Agnes chuckled and let out a stream of smoke. "She's right, lad. Wait till morning." She noted the look of smug satisfaction on the girl's face. "The sun will drive some of them under cover during the day, and you'll have a better chance of getting back home in one piece. The quicker I can get back to the fort, the quicker we can send men out to bring Callie, you, and Sergeant Astle back to safety in the village. And if you bring a dozen armed men through the woods at night, you'll either get lost in the snow or you'll stir up any orcs still in the forest." Goody Bamba drew on her pipe again and exhaled before proceeding. "There'd be more than just black blood on the snow tonight, lad, and we wouldn't want any of the red to be yours." Her piercing grey eyes locked on Mylo's, but her voice was soft, almost mellow as she continued. "Callie's right, lad. Stay the night. Rest and things will look better in the morn, I promise." The fight had almost left Mylo. He couldn't beat two strong-willed women who had ganged up on him like this, but he managed one last counterattack. "But what if they find us here tonight?" The old woman chuckled again. "They'll not find us. Not tonight, lad. Me and old man Bamba lived here nigh on 50 years, and they never found us if they meant us any harm." She rose to her feet, her knees creaking more loudly than the old wooden rocking chair, and tottered to the short distance to Sergeant Astle's prone form. Artfully, Goody Bamba changed the subject as she checked the soldier's wound. "Girl," she muttered, "get clean bandages." Callie watched intently as Goody Bamba changed the soldier's dressing. She gasped and held her nose as the old woman peeled one of the bandages from his skin. "What's that stink?" she said through gritted teeth. "The poison in the wound, most likely from the orc's sword. Evil bastards to use poison like this," Agnes cursed. She folded the stinking bandage, a strip of dark blue velvet from Callie's dress, and hid the green slime of extracted filth from the girl's eyes before throwing the cloth into the fire. Best to burn the whole thing than risk the poison spreading. "You did well, Gert," she said. "Cleaning the wound and keeping him warm on the right here probably saved his life." Rather shamefully, Callie felt the glow of pride in her heart as she heard Goody Bamba's compliment. She looked around, then snapped back to her senses. "Where's Mylo?" she asked. Suddenly, pride was replaced by searing guilt and a jolt of fear. Mylo had gone, ignored all common sense, and ridden back to Hessard's Ford. Callie bolted for the cottage door and flung it wide. The snow was falling harder now, and she could barely see 10 feet, but she could just make out faded, snow-covered footprints heading in the direction of the lean-to where they had tethered the horse. "Mylo!" she shouted, manners, politeness, and her ladylike demeanour forgotten in an instant. "Where are you?" She headed out of the cottage towards the lean-to, calling Mylo's name as she ran. Mylo looked back as Callie charged into the shack and collided with him. He caught her in both arms and barely managed to keep their balance. "What's wrong?" he asked quite innocently. "We thought you'd gone back to the village," Callie blurted. "You should have told us you were going out." I just wanted to check the horse, Mylo managed lamely. He was in just as much danger as we were, and that sort of thing can spook horses really badly. Callie was coming slowly calming to herself as he spoke. It looked like you had your hands full with Goody Bamba, so I slipped out, he said gently, and raised Callie's chin and looked into her eyes. I'm sorry. Relief crashed over Callie like an ocean wave. She could see in his eyes that he was not lying to her. Don't disappear from me again, she whispered. Mylo gently held her chin and gazed down at her beautiful blue eyes. She bit her lower lip nervously as Mylo dipped his head a fraction closer. Closer. The tips of their noses touched. Callie closed her eyes. Girl, have you found him yet? Goody Bamba's voice, even through the muffled snow, carried its weight of authority and jerked Callie back from the brink of the kiss. She pushed away from Mylo, blushing furiously, and managed to stammer, Yes, he's here. Thank you.
Right, so please unmute yourself if you muted yourself. And Colin is my long-time collaborator and partner in crime on Fiction Fix Live and Fiction Fix Online. So many thanks to him. And will you please now show your appreciation for Colin A Brett and Mylo?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okie doke. So now today we have 3 new readers for you, plus 1 returning reader. It was a while though, wasn't it, Terry? Our second performer this afternoon is Helen. Oh, there she is. A lovely lady that I met on Brian Cohen's Amazon advertising course, who writes as AA Abbott. And it's a change of genre now on Fiction Fix Online. So please mute yourself during the reading, and let's have a warm welcome for AA Abbott reading from her domestic noir stroke psychological thriller, Bright Lies. Away.
Thank you. I'm going to read from chapter 4, July 2014. Emily. Mum is in love with David Anderson, and it's like all her dreams have come true. At first, she couldn't believe he was interested. He's rich, handsome, and successful. When Mrs. Harris heard he was 30, she said it was cradle snatching. Mum's 35, after all. David treated Mum to a surprise holiday in Thailand, where he has a furniture business, then proposed to her on the beach. They chose a pearl ring made by local fishermen. She gave it to me once they were back, and he'd bought her a proper one with a massive diamond. Suddenly, life is fun. We have a new TV on the sideboard. Mum and I sit in front of it, eating popcorn and watching Disney DVDs. She always felt bad that she couldn't afford them before. Although she said she didn't struggle so much for cash before Dad died. I was 2 then. I don't recall those times, or him at all. Now money's no object. David has loads. While Mum has date nights twice a week, I've hardly seen David since the art exhibition where we first met. It's a surprise when she says he's suggested taking me shopping. When? I ask. Tomorrow afternoon. It just seemed to fit. I mean, I know we usually spend time together on Saturday, but I actually managed to get an appointment to have my hair done. You remember, Dave bought me vouchers for my birthday. So you won't come with us? I'm both excited and nervous at the thought of being alone with him. No, Dave said he was going out to buy clothes for himself, and he'd get you a couple of bits too. She pulls a face. He's generous, so please don't take advantage. I won't, I promise. Later, as I prepare for bed, I catch Liam Payne's eyes looking down on me from the wardrobe. His newest hairstyle is a quiff. He looks incredible. You're the only one I love, Liam, I whispered to him. David picks me up in his Range Rover at 2 o'clock. Nerves overcome me at first. I sit in silence as we ride smoothly out of the village and past the farms beyond. Let's put on the radio, David says. What kind of music do you like? One Direction. We'll try Radio 1 then. Maybe we'll get lucky. Who's your fave out of the 1D boys? Liam. He's definitely the best looking. He used to have the same hairstyle as you, I say shyly. No way. Yes, but he has a quiff now. Think a quiff would suit me. There is a twinkle in David's eye. I stare at his profile. He could be even more handsome than Liam. Definitely, I say, ignoring a twinge of guilt. I'll have to experiment. Would you like a makeover too? You want to be a beautiful bridesmaid, don't you? Yes, please. A makeover sounds grown up. I've never had one, and nor has Megan. She'll want to hear all about it. I'll book it for you. David stops the car and makes a phone call. I'm beginning to relax now. As we set off again with the radio jangling, David talks about his art. I enjoy sitting in the passenger seat beside him, high above the road. This is the first lift I've had from anyone since his exhibition. Mum doesn't have the money to run a car. Megan is lucky to have the Safira and 2 parents to drive it. Even her older brother takes her out occasionally when he's on leave from the army. We soon arrive in Bath. David puts the Range Rover in the underground car park at Southgate. The first shop we visit is MAC, where he's booked a makeup lesson. The only cosmetics I own are an eyeshadow palette, mascara, lipstick, and 2 glosses from Superdrug. I bought them in the January sale, and nothing cost more than £2. Although MAC is stylish and shiny, I'm mortified when we walk in and I spot the price tags. Are you sure about this? I point to a row of powders costing £20 each. Let me splash out, David says. You won't be a bridesmaid every week. The staff find a chair for me and my makeup artist introduces herself. She's called Chloe. Like all the boys and girls working here, she has a black uniform but her own distinctive style. Her short hair is spiky, coloured in dark shades of purple. In contrast, her face is fresh and natural. Trained by watching beauty vloggers with Megan, I spot pink sparkle on her lids and a hint of blusher on her cheeks. What kind of look do you want to achieve? She asks. I turn questioning eyes to David. Maybe something a bit stronger than yours, he suggests to her. Say a smoky eye and a nude lip. It's for a wedding. How exciting! What will you be wearing? Chloe beams at me. We're browsing later, David says. That isn't what Mum told me, but I'm not complaining. Let's do the smoky eye then, Chloe says. It goes with everything. Your dad has good taste. Thanks. David doesn't seem to mind her guesswork. He seems completely at ease. I can't imagine Mr. Harris hanging around while Megan tries on makeup. Chloe gathers a host of products and brushes, arranging them on the surface in front of me. Directly ahead, there's a mirror. I watch as she cleanses my skin and applies the products. The transformation is amazing. You see how the brushes and sponges give a flawless result? She asks as she sprays a fine mist over my face to finish off. It's lovely, I gasp. You look stunning, princess. David can't seem to tear his eyes away from my face. I glow with pride. I think you should try a brighter lipstick too, to stand out in the photos, Chloe says. Perhaps with a hint of blue. That would really make your eyes pop. Can I ask David. Of course. She paints on a fuchsia shade. It's striking. David sounds impressed. But wipe it off before you get home, Emily. Your mum will think it's too much. Can I wear it now, please, around the shops? I'm unashamedly wheedling. If I can be the new glamorous me for only an hour, I'll be happy. David agrees. He insists on buying both lipsticks and all the other products. I'd love to take you to an art supply shop, but I promised Rachel I'd get you some clothes, he says as we leave. That's okay. I already feel spoiled. We visit 6 different places and I end up with 2 pairs of jeans, tops, shoes, and even underwear. Your boyfriend's generous, one of the shop ladies laughs. I glance anxiously at David, thinking he'll want to correct her, but he puts a finger to his lips. His gaze is strangely intense. He takes me to a coffee bar. A scone alone is £4. Mum and I would have lived on that for a day. We sit facing each other silently across the small table. David stares at me, his expression so serious that I begin to worry. What? I ask, twisting a tendril of blonde hair around my finger. His brown eyes never leaving my face, he says, you won't have to call me Dad, you know. I start to giggle with relief. David reacts with mock horror. Should I be concerned? I was about to suggest Dave, but you've obviously got an alternative in mind. Baby David? To my embarrassment, I'm blushing. Some of my friends argue all the time with their stepfathers. I can't imagine having that problem with David. Mum's not the only lucky one. He puts his hand on mine. I'm so glad I found you, he says. There's something special about you. He squeezes my hand. I feel comforted and reassured. He'll take care of us and everything will be all right. Thank you.
Okay, so are we all unmuted? Because it's time to make some noise again for AA Abbott and Bright Lies.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for that. That was slightly worrying there. Yeah, I can see where you're going with this, I think. But anyway, so now we're going to welcome back Terry, who is our returning reader for today. And he read once or twice. Was it once or twice? I can't remember whether it was once or a couple of times. Hang on. Whoa. Yeah, oh, that's better.
Yeah, I did it twice, Helen.
Yeah, I thought you did it twice.
Long while ago.
Yeah, definitely. So Terry read at Fiction Fix Live when we used to be in a pub. And he's one of my Spalding Library workshop learners. So how about a big hand for Terry Roberts and his mainstream humour novella, Ward 27B. Now, I should say there is a slight language warning for this extract, but please mute yourself during the reading, but let's give him a round of applause.
Okay. Hello, everybody, and thank you. Ward 27B is my first ever attempt at a book. It's a story of a man called David Woodcock. David found himself in hospital as a result of a road traffic accident. He's a man who very quickly forms opinions about people and often not totally correct. Two of the long-term co-patients, 27B, are Sam Matu, who's an immigrant of Filipino origin, and a man called Sing-Along Cockney John. He's a retired bus driver and is a local musical entertainer latterly. We'll call him SACJ going forward from now, because that's quite long-winded. He'd renamed David Blurt because Sam Matu had read David's name on the bed, and David's middle name is Albert, and he pronounced it Ablert, and CAG thought it was funny just to call him Blurt going forward. More fortunately probably than David realised, David was unable to complain about any of this or comment on it because of his accident. His jaw was wired together and he couldn't speak, so to lay there in frustration, listening to the things going on around him. So yeah, that's briefly the background of it. This is, or will be, hopefully chapter 11 when the book's edited, and I'll just read you that now, and I hope you enjoy it. You may think that I was a little hasty in my judgment of SACJ. Hopefully, the following will provide adequate evidence as to why such views took hold so readily. It seemed to me that SACJ craved confirmation of his status as an entertainer and had an almost literally captive audience. He also had Sam. Sam, a man I assumed would be too frightened to do anything other than inflate SACJ's ego by laughing at his jokes and accepting his insults and banter with apparent ease. After the incident of Sam mispronouncing my name, SACJ said that he would teach the former to speak better English. That, of course, isn't how he put it. My recollection is along the lines of, I'll get your English good, me old China. I'll learn you it proper. Once a day, as they weren't connected to drips or totally confined to bed as I was, they were put in wheelchairs and moved to an area that gave them a good vantage point of the local park situated some 3 floors below. Whilst viewing the goings-on below, SACJ would point out things and ask Sam what they were. Most answers resulted in SACJ bursting into laughter at his pupil's linguistic shortcomings. Okay, so he would correct him, therefore teaching him something of use. I saw nothing altruistic in it. SACJ was choosing things that he knew or guessed that Sam would struggle with, purely for his own entertainment. He would drop in useless things like old wives' tales and superstition. It got to the point where Sam was saluting every bird his eyes came across and excitedly shouting, "Good morning, Mr. Magpie. How's your lady wife?" SACJ repeatedly pointed out that you should only do this if it actually was a magpie, but Sam loved doing it. SACJ offered a deal whereby Sam could only say it if the bird was black and white. Like at the zoo, Sam queried. The zoo? You don't get magpies at the zoo. Bloody hell, Sam, you mean penguins? Penguins don't ever go to the zoo and start saluting bloody penguins and asking how their missus is. If they don't cart you off to the loony bin first, you'll die of exhaustion. There's bloody hundreds of them to get through. He would also try to teach Sam by means of jokes, or what SACJ regarded as humour. On the odd occasion, when SACJ did come out with something both inoffensive and mildly amusing, it was wasted on his pupil. Now then, Sam, what type of dog is that yellow one over there? Sam, looking very pleased with himself, proudly announced, Labrador. Nearly, but look again. Notice that white dish round its neck. I couldn't see anything, but assumed that the dog must have recently had an operation or something and had one of those large collars things on to stop it washing or biting itself. It is, it's a Labrador like yesterday, said a slightly dejected Sam. No, my old China, look at that satellite dish it's wearing. It's a golden receiver. SACJ laughed out loud at his own joke. Sam looked totally confused and crestfallen. SACJ eventually showed a small level of compassion and attempted to explain to Sam about plays on words and the like, but his subject didn't totally grasp the concept. One other memorable vocabulary lesson was the attempt at the archaic and childish game of the minister's cat. If you're not familiar with it, and I'm not suggesting for a moment that you should be, it's basically just a game of coming up with a word that starts with the subsequent letter alphabetically to the first letter of the previous player's attempt. You'll pick it up quite quickly, I would think, unlike Sam. So this is how it goes, Sam. You clap 4 times and then say, the minister's cat is a something cat. The word something is replaced by a word that begins with the right letter, depending on where we are in the alphabet. Sam looked totally confused. I'll demonstrate, said SACJ. Clap, 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 clap. The minister's cat is an angry cat. Clap, 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 clap. The minister's cat is a busy cat. Clap, 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 clap. The minister's cat is a caring cat, and so on. Do you get it, Sam? You've learned loads of new words and it'll be good to use them. I could see that Sam, as ever, was only trying to please his tormentor, but he grinned and nodded the affirmative. Right then, clap 4 times and then say, the minister's cat is a, your word, cat. Remember that your word must begin with A, then I do B, you do C, and we keep going through the alphabet until one of us can't think of anything. I don't mind telling you that I was intrigued to see where this went, if in fact it went anywhere. Off you go, Mr. Matu. Clap, 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 clap. The minister's cat is a cat. A what? A cat. No, Sam, no, it has to be a describing word. Have you any idea how difficult it is to express adjective, you moron, without the power of speech? I thought not, indeed, neither did I until that moment. I'll do B, and you try to think of something begin with C. For your turn. Clap, 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 clap. The minister's cat is a beautiful cat. Sam looks a little more confident this time. Clap, 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 clap. The minister's cat is a cat. Come on, mate, surely cat isn't the only word you can think of that starts with C. That's rubbish. I'll tell you what, I'll do D and E, and that should give you time to think of something beginning with F. S-A-C-G, start again. Clap, 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 clap. The minister's cat is a dangerous cat. Clap, 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 clap. The minister's cat is an elegant cat. Ready, S-A-C-G. Sam, looking more confident than anyone I've ever seen, nodded his head and proceeds to clap loudly. Possibly due to excitement, or possibly a tiny bit of doubt, Sam built up his part with 2 extra rounds of percussive introduction. Clap, 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 clap. It was exactly at this point that I noticed the doors would open. In walked 3 people, who I was later discovered were a member of the senior management team of the hospital and 2 journalists from the national press, who were doing an investigative piece on how much better a patient's recovery was if they were treated by a more relaxing and calmer private sector than a hectic and stressed NHS. They were greeted by grinning Sam Matu, who was revving up to his big moment. Clap, 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 clap. The minister's cat is. I initially thought that he may have forgotten his word, but it soon became clear that he was just teasing his audience. Proud as he was of what he was going to say, the minister's cat is. The minister's cat is a fucking cat. He shouted out so loudly, as we were later to find out, all of the neighbouring words heard it, including the very expensive, very private ones. I looked around to see what responses had caused. The newly arrived journalists were hastily ushered out of the ward by the hospital manager, who equally hastily beckoned Nurse Mariola to tend to Mr. Matu, who had obviously had an adverse reaction to his medication. Nurse Mariola calmly asked Sam if he was feeling okay. He tried to explain that he was only playing a language game with SACJ. SACJ was, of course, fast asleep and oblivious to it all. I was, of course, annoyed with the whole event, but looked forward to when I could actually accuse SACJ of being the catalyst that caused Sam's embarrassment and the pleasure I'd experienced from him not knowing how clever I had been by using the word catalyst with reference to the game in question. Thank you.
Okay, so that was great. So please unmute yourselves now, everybody, and will you please give it up for Terry Roberts and the hilarious Ward 27B.
Thank you.
Okay, and now I would like to introduce Eddie, whom I met online a few months ago. Was it in Alessandra Torres' group? I think it was.
Yes.
Yeah, So obviously, please mute yourself during the reading. But for now, please put your hands together for Eddie Johnson with his novel, Breaking the Tranquility of Solitude.
So thank you, and thanks for letting me come along today. So I've just put something in the sidebar to give you a little bit of information, and hopefully it will help. So I can't see you now because I've got my screen up in front of me, so hopefully I don't look too bad. So here we go. It had long been believed that the incredible leaps in man's ability to transport himself over massive distances were literally only a single innovation away. Brody now genuinely thought he discovered the final missing link in that innovation chain, the link that all other striving scientists had been searching for over the years, the holy grail of transportation theory. Could he possibly ignore any conflicting data as insignificant minutiae and just go to the meeting with Mr. Harris regardless? One more test will do it. He was fully convinced and braced himself for the meeting more than the transportation itself. The sickly feeling he was preempting stemmed from the main issue with standard molecular transport. It isn't possible to disassociate or reinstall memory engrams at the same speed as normal atoms, molecules, and physical DNA are moved. Memories have no physical form, so react totally differently when removed from their holding vessel, the brain itself. Thus, a feeling of travel sickness tended to occur for a few seconds as the brain, in effect, was being reprogrammed with the same information that it had held before transport initiation. For now, his expectation of this common nauseous experience was the least of his concerns. One of the major planned offshoots of the transport technology, which Brody was so excited to be involved with, was the potential to use this stomach-churning temporal lag to develop a method of curing all cancers. His mind drifted momentarily to the simple collection and filtering of disassociated particles mid-transport, which could theoretically filter out the disease. Successful reassembly of everything held in flux, minus the offending malignancy, was the hope. He grimaced to himself as he considered the word simple. It seemed so inappropriate in any sentence that described molecular transport. This was one of the main reasons why Brody was so completely consumed with getting things exactly right, because he had extensive personal experiences of the ravages of this terrible disease. Even in today's advanced world of high technology, it still haunted him that nobody had yet cured this monster that had robbed him of so many friends and family in the past. The sickly feeling he was expecting started to well within him, and he mentally braced himself again. The fact that the two transportation pods in his lab were only a few meters apart was, by the technology of the day, largely irrelevant. Physical distances could now be measured phasically. This word wasn't even in the dictionary yet, but it was the term that Brody had decided should be used, and he repeated it to himself aloud now as if to reinforce its validity. Phasically. Phasically, I like it. Transported items could theoretically be moved millions or even potentially billions of miles in mere moments using the temporary creation of conduits between alternate planes of reality and the boundaries between parallel universes. If it could be dreamt up, it could be made to happen, was what he always used to say. And with this, one of his own mottos, ringing in his ears, he knew only too well that his calculations and theories had to be completely accurate. With only minor data return question marks that needed ironing out, Brody was supremely confident, but he knew even a single error wouldn't be acceptable to his bosses, and if he were to succeed towards commercial development, perfection would be expected. Cash holstered his steaming soldering iron, picked up his internal phone and dialed 1 for Charlie's office extension. She answered within one ring, having expected the call. "Has he gone up yet?" she inquired anxiously. "No, but I think I heard his door squeak. I reckon one of his compulsions has kicked in and he's gone to tidy up and reorganize his files. Don't worry. I'll let you know as soon as he comes down. Chill a bit and trust me. He's going to nail it." "Okay." She paused, unsure whether to confide. "I pretty much said yes to a date for tonight, and he genuinely sounded like he might ditch Bruce." Her trailing voice gave away the questioning lack of confidence in the last 5 words. "Yeah, I heard, but I wouldn't bank on the Bruce bit. You two need to get sorted. I'm getting bored with waiting for the engagement party." Cash laughed quietly and could hear Charlie sigh softly in response. "I don't want to affect his work right now. It's very important to him." She dragged out possibly her most feeble excuse yet, especially for Cash. "You can blag all you like. I know you, Charlie, and I know you two will be perfect for each other." Cash responded firmly. "Yeah, I know, but I just want to hear some commitment in his voice. I know it sounds stupid, Cash, but after all the nights out with you and Alia, I've seen many different sides to him, and I love them all. I accept this, stop there, all except this false front he seems to want to protect himself with. I know it isn't really him. All I want is a bit of good old-fashioned love and attention, and I'm scared that he might only want casual..." Her voice trailed as she questioned herself now more than Cash. Alia was Cash's wife. She and Charlie had become close friends over the past couple of years, and the two regularly gossiping about more interesting things than astrophysics and transporting a molecule here and there. "You can trust me, girl. As far as you're concerned, casual isn't even a word he knows exists. He absolutely loves the bones of you." Her cheeks flushed and red, and she hesitated, not sure what to say next. Back in Pod 1, on his one final test, Brody believed wholeheartedly he was ready. As on all 665 previous tests, regardless of minor resultant data conflict, he had always got 100% categorical physical success. Why then was he suddenly feeling sick to the stomach and reeling within the pod? Before he could answer this question or his gut could regurgitate his breakfast, he passed out cold and fell to the pod floor. An unknown period of time passed, and eventually he woke and got shakily to his feet. The sweat was dripping from his brow as the maglock on the transportation door spun, finally clicked, and the door slid back. A wave of emotion coursed through his system, and he felt faint again as he realised he wasn't back in his lab or even in the return pod where he should have been. He was still in pod 1, and it was the outside environment that seemed to have changed. This completely unexpected new optical revelation contradicted all the understanding of his science that he was trying to further. Both pods were bolted down to their earthing plates and so couldn't move. I can't hear much, but I reckon I saw someone milling about through the glass a second ago. Better go. I'll call you later if I hear anything else. Cash comforted Charlie, knowing that she really wanted to progress her relationship with Brody, but he knew his friend was prone to flippancy when not head down at work. It was his way of coping. Thanks, Cash. She blew her friend a kiss down the phone and gently replaced the receiver. She was anxious because after many casual relationships that had gone nowhere, she'd become guarded about letting anyone know her true feelings. Brody had broken that barrier on day 1 and she'd fallen for him soon after. It was a little primordial and she wasn't quite sure why, but he intrigued her. Physical attraction aside, she wanted to understand him, but so far saw only a frightened man hiding behind humour. Not for over a year had she realised that the disconcerting pangs she often felt coincided with when he entered the room, and it wasn't indigestion, but her growing attraction to this enigmatic anomaly that was Brody Martins. After all of Cash and Alia's partisan encouragement, she loved him now for certain, but she was holding back because he was on the cusp of an important development. Excuses were easier than letting her guard down by openly admitting to herself that if they'd actually got any future together, she might need to change as much as he did, in acceptance of who they both were as individuals and to find out what they both truly wanted. If nothing else, she mentally promised herself to let him know her true feelings next time she saw him. Brody, dazed and confused, automatically tried to comfort himself with humour and spoke aloud with a mixture of sarcasm and worry. Did the earth move for you, babe? With nobody there to hear his jest, he couldn't even muster a smile himself in response to his frivolous question, and so stared blankly out of the pod. Neither his normal predilection for humour nor his habitual thinking about Charlie were of any comfort to him now. He'd fallen head over heels the day they met, but despaired at the chance of ever reciprocating the feeling. He heaved a huge sigh of no going back now proportions, then very tentatively took his first Armstrong-esque small step out of the pod. He definitely wasn't mentally prepared for the giant leap into the complete unknown that he was just about to take. Incredibly, what he now saw in front of him as he stepped out of the pod was a wide beach scene with what looked like a huge Viking ship in the distance. What the He said it out loud, but his words trailed away to nothing. Taking a moment or two to steady himself from the dizzying experience, he stepped cautiously further out. With his feet in casual loafers, he sank into the crisp, sugary sand. It's real. The mere thought was astounding, let alone the reality. It's actually real. His anxious thoughts spilled from his lips now, but still he bent and touched the sand in disbelief, running his fingers through it like an excited child. A child at the seaside for the first time, having never seen the sea, let alone a Viking ship. It wasn't excitement he felt, though. This was just not right. He knew only too well that he should, by rights, still be in his lab, returning from a 25-second, 2 billion mile phased transportation that he had so successfully completed so many times before. What's happened? What could possibly have gone wrong? As he started to try to compute the possibilities while thoughts were randomly jostling for position in his mind, he was promptly interrupted by the sound of the transportation pod door beginning to slide shut behind him. Letting go of all the computations, he turned to see the whole pod fading from vision. He desperately dived, goalkeeper-like, clutching at the disintegrating image as he grabbed only air and landed firmly on the soft, warm sand where the pod had previously stood. Panic now began to edge into his mind. Thank you. I think I ran over.
I'm sure it's not going to matter too much, actually.
Little hiccup slowed me down.
That was a good place to end. Right, so please unmute yourselves now. And will you please make some more noise for Eddie Johnson and Breaking the Tranquility of Solitude.
Thank you.
Fabulous. Right. Okay, and now for another new reader, Lucy, who isn't from as far away as Eddie. She's and certainly not from as far away as America. She's relatively local in Rutland. So please mute yourself during the reading. But first, I'd like to introduce Lucy Lunatique as she reads Father Sin, which is from her collection of young adult dark fantasy. Oh, and by the way, she's also a playwright and a published poet. So welcome, Lucy.
Thank you. Right, first off, before I start, I will apologise if I get a coughing fit, which is why I've got so many drinks here. This is part of a selection of short stories from my Puppet Master series. Abigail was 6 when she went missing. Our mother had warned us both about what happens to those who are given to Father Sin. She would tell us of the story of little Frankie Doyle, a 10-year-old boy who lived in our village, and all of a sudden he wasn't there anymore. Mother said Father Sin had took him away from his ma and pa. Father Sin was always watching, she said, waiting for that moment when a child was curious enough to try and take a different path to the one he or she was meant to be walking in God's grace. Never stray from the path of the righteous, she'd say, else Father Sin will come and meet you and take you away, far, far away. To where? Abigail would probe, for she was always bolder than I was, even with my 4 years on her. See, I was a meek and mild child, Mother used to say, and Abigail were the bold yet not old one. A little part of me was always envious, yet in awe of Abigail. Nothing scared her, nothing at all. I remember when we went with Orla to the lake. It was a scorching hot day, and so we all went swimming, except Abigail. She decided she wanted to jump off the highest point of the rocks into the lake. I was terrified and told her not to be so stupid. You'll kill yourself, you silly girl. But she just smiled at me and looked up with those big green eyes of hers and did it anyway. That were Abigail's way. At least, that used to be Abigail's way. Until she disappeared. Until Father Sin took us from us. Father Sin is always watching you. Mother looked earnestly into our captivated eyes. I could feel mine widening like they were about to explode out my head. He comes in many guises, she continued. Never the same guise teaching every child that he steals away from their families. My skin started to prickle in fear, and I could feel the hairs on my arms stand to attention like soldiers awaiting orders. Abigail shifted in her seat in excitement. She was always asking Mother to tell us scary stories at night just before bed. Mother stopped telling them to us, as I'd been too scared by the last one, that I had fevered nights and didn't fall asleep for many a night as a result of them. In the end, she stopped telling them, apart from Father Sin. This story, she would say, is an important lesson to teach us not to stray from the path of goodness in life, away from those who would love and keep you to the right side of the Lord's way. My eyes started to sting as I felt the familiarity of salt water prickling and tumbling down my cheeks and rivulets. I wiped the traces away and steeled myself. I was not going to cry, not this time, and not in front of Abigail, my baby sister. What sort of big sister were I? The 10-year-old elder who's too scared to listen to stories at night? The big sister who cried when anyone said boo? Pathetic. That's what I was, just a big fraidy cat with a yellow spine. So this time, come up, mate, I was not going to cry. Mother was wise, though. She had the sense, and she'd know things more often than not before they happened. But she never saw what was about to happen to Abigail. But I did. I saw it coming miles away. The first time I saw Father Sin with my own eyes. Yeah, that's right, I saw him. Only fleetingly, mind, but enough to chill me to the core. Dark, shadowy figure he were, all dressed in greys with a distressed hat that hid half his face. Straight after that, I thought back to the last time I saw Frankie Doyle. Frankie'd never been a popular one at school because he was so heavy belt, but he'd always been nice to me. Most of the others would tease him rotten. They call him the pit or the greedy guzzler. Frankie loved sweet stuff and cake. That were his downfall. And it didn't help that his ma and pa ran the village bake shop, but they doted on him all the same. Mother said it were greed that got Frankie. If it hadn't been so greedy, he would still be here, but I didn't think that was fair to Frankie. He couldn't help himself, and it weren't like he had many friends to help him neither. There were loads of stories went round at the time, especially after Frankie Doyle's body were found. Some say it was traveller types and that they cursed him. Others said it was the fairy folk in the woods, but our mother said it was Father Sin who came and punished the boy for his greed. He was found hanging from a tree, his guts hanging outside his stomach, like red ropes. Mother said it were a warning to us all. But it weren't greed that got Abigail missing, that's for sure. Most folk who knew us would all say, "Are you two really sisters?" Not because of our ages, mind, but because Abigail stood apart from Mother and me. She was born with a shock of red hair that looked like it were a flame when the sun caught it. None of us could work out where she got it from, but it made her stand out, that's for sure, especially with those piercing green eyes of hers. Mother used to joke that she found her in a fairy circle. Abigail loved that story. I'd gone out for a walk, Mother would say, and as I was collecting flowers, I came across a small glen. There, in a clearing in the wood where a sunbeam breaking its way through the tree branches, it lit up something so beautiful. I had to go look. And there, in the centre of a fairing, lay a beautiful child. Mother's eyes would sparkle as she told the story, and a smile would creep into the corners of her mouth as we sat there, riveted to the tale she told. A beautiful fairy flew into the circle and kissed the babe on her forehead. Blessed by fairies she were, a halfling, you might say. It was then she spoke to me. Her voice was like a soft and sparkling melody. She asked me to look after the child as if it were my own blood. She would smile with twinkling eyes at the pair of us looking at her, and raptured faces in turn. I wish I'd been born of fairies, I would say. And Mother smiled at me kindly before she spoke again. Oh, but you were born by the smile of the gods, she would reply, and I'd smile back at her for her sake, not mine. Inwardly, I was thinking that fairies are much more beautiful and magical than the gods. So when will my wings grow? Asked Abigail excitedly. She began to jump up and down as if trying to fly. Mother played the game well. Oh, well, they won't grow until you're old enough to fly and live a good and kind life. Abigail would furry her brow at this, and each time she'd ask, so when will I be old enough? Our mother would answer with a warm yet wry smile. After the story were finished, she would make us lie down in our beds, tuck us in before lighting a candle for us. A light to always find your way home from dreamland. I was grateful for that. I didn't like it when it were dark. I could see pictures on the ceiling moving above me, especially when there were no light. Abigail used to say it was just the fairies coming to talk to her, but I knew better than that. Do you think the fairies will come to take me home again one day? She would ask me. Your home is with us. It's just a bedtime story, I would say as I tried to get to sleep. No, it's not, she would argue. Mother doesn't tell us lies, else Father Sin would come for her. I shuddered at the very thought of it. It's not a lie, you stupid girl, I hissed. It's a story, that's all. You're wrong, I tell you. Abigail started to get angry and sat up in bed, glaring at me. What do you want me to say then? I was getting angry too. Be honest, say that the fairies are real. Her bottom lip quivered as she pouted and folded her arms tightly against her chest. She was clearly upset, but I didn't care. How can I be honest when they're not? I retorted harshly. It was then that I saw something I'd never seen before. Abigail, bright, fearless Abigail, began to cry. At first, I didn't quite know what to do or say. I mean, Abigail used to say she was kissed by fairies. All babies cry as soon as they come into the world, except for Abigail. The doctor had been worried she'd been born still because she didn't make a noise, not a single sound. All she did was open them eyes of hers and look at the new world around her. Mother wasn't fussed, though. She just took her into her arms and placed her against her breast. But now, Abigail was crying and I was to blame for it. I'm sorry, I said. I lied. Of course the fairies are real. Abigail stopped crying just for a minute. Trails of little salty tears glistened against her flushed cheeks. Really? She asked. Her huge green eyes began widening. Yes, I replied. I'm sorry, Abigail. I just needed to get some sleep. She smiled that huge smile of hers and her eyes twinkled like Mother's did. All the same, we do need to get to sleep. Abigail nodded and wiped her tears away with a chubby little hand before settling back to bed again. The following morning, we got up, washed, dressed, and went to the kitchen for breakfast. Mother placed a large steaming bowl of porridge in front of us and 2 slices of bread and honey. So, how's my sweet ones this morning? Mother would ask. I smiled at her whilst eating my porridge, half of it dripping down my face. Abigail piped up. Mother, will you take us to see the fairy circle? Mother smiled warmly at her. Not today, Abigail. There's too much to be done and you'll be tired after school. No, I won't, I promise. She stared earnestly at Mother, pleading. I'm sorry, Abigail, but not today, as I already told you. Mother was final on the matter. You always knew she was resolute, as her brow would lower slightly and her tone dropped. But Mother... Abigail was pushing the matter now, and Mother wasn't budging an inch. Abigail, that is enough. Mother was getting cross. She never got cross with Abigail, not normally, and it were an odd and disturbing sight to see. Abigail was shocked and she shrank slightly before apologising to Mother. I'm sorry, Mother, I won't say it again. Mother passed us our books and kissed us goodbye, and I could hear her call out as we left, stay on the path. I could already feel in my bones that trouble and curiosity had got the best of Abigail. As we walked through the forest to our schoolhouse, Abigail started to slow her pace until she stopped altogether. She turned to me, her face cemented in seriousness, which was unusual for her. She always wore a bright and cheeky smile. I'm going to find the fairy circle. Couldn't believe what I was thinking. Abigail, you can't. Heard what Mother said. Abigail looked at me steady-eyed, almost as if she'd grown 10 years in the matter of a minute. I don't wish to upset Mother, but I have to find it. I paused for a minute, not sure of what to say. All of a sudden, I heard words slip from my mouth. Fine, but I'm going with you. What on earth was I thinking? Thank you.
Okay, so please unmute yourself now, and will you please get your hands working again for Lucy Lunatique and Father Sin? Yes, okay. So now I'm going to close the session with a reading from the Zardoth Imperative Clanship. We're still on chapter 8. And in this scene, IR meets his father again. So you might remember, or some of you might remember from last time, that we, the children, over the last few sessions, the children were actually taken prisoner when the ship was boarded by the Kiai troops. Okay, there's a little bit of Zardothi that I need to tell you about. It's the word Shiroli, and it means the pregnant ladies of the clan. Okay. IR searched the crowds as well as the stinging in his eyes permitted. Most of the people in the compound were Declaney. They resembled the humans, but were on average taller than most. Now IR saw them side by side, though shorter than the Zardothi. There were a few Kiai in the compound, males, since the Voth had restricted the females to their home planet for breeding purposes, once they'd realised both sexes were necessary for troop production. But the Zardothi formed a group apart from the rest. IR made a quick estimate of numbers, fewer than 200, and it looks as if they're shunned by the Kiai and the Declaney. He beckoned to the other children and walked towards the group. His teary gaze roved around the leather-clad forms, seeking his father. He spotted many faces he recognised. Kaj Kalinga's mother stood alone, face blank. Chanig Dar's father talked to Ulmar Majati's parents, and Miral's parents knelt as Laline rubbed Erin's back. He recognised many other faces that he couldn't name immediately. Then he spotted his father. Lomar had his eyes closed and leant with his back against the perimeter fence. IR thought he was asleep. He approached in silence and squatted beside him. From there, he stretched out his legs, leant back against the taut mesh of the fence beside Lomar, and waited for him to wake. IR studied his father. The last 11 years had taken its toll on his once fit body. His clothes hung on him as if his captors had systematically starved him. His skin was blotched and loose, his hair crest grey in places. IR remembered that his mother had been several years younger than his father, and his chest tightened at the thought of what he must tell him. The sting of moisture in his eyes abated as IR amused himself by watching the other children approach their parents, and their surprise and pleasure, though their pleasure became horror as they realised their children were also captives. But the noise grew as parents recognised children and hugged them. It was after one particularly noisy reunion that Lomar opened his eyes. What's all that? His eyes lit on IR. What are you doing here? He lifted his hands to rub his eyes. Are you real? IR stopped him. We came to help you, he said. Lomar's fierce voice interrupted him. And got yourself captured for your pains. Well, yes, IR began. Lomar's voice was soft and chill. That was the most stupid thing you could have done. We're not alone, IR interrupted, and at least we know you're alive and what happened to you now. We needed that information to mount a rescue. Lomar slumped back against the mesh. I suppose, he said. The fight had left his voice and he sounded tired. Rilla's not with you? No, Sars. Sars is like Mr. IR used the honorific. He needed to distance himself from what he must tell Lomar. He hesitated. There's no way to soften the blow, he thought. The Voth killed her and the other Shiroli on the Bekel. I see. Lomar was silent for a moment. What happened? I outlined what he'd seen on the ship's logs. I'm so sorry, Father. So am I. Lomar sighed. I did notice you're not clan claimed. What took you so long? We had to grow up. IR's voice was mild. He thought, somehow I don't think he's going to like any of what I have to tell him. He was right. They did what to you? Lomar thundered when IR told him each child had been sent to live in a different country and communication with the others prevented. Now is not the right time to tell him that the new Luddites kidnapped me, he decided. A Kiai guard poked his weapon through the fence and said, too much noise, Zardathi. Keep the volume down. His tone was mild enough that IR wondered exactly what the Kiai troops' relationship with the Zardathi captives was. After all, we were contracted to help them before declaim. Lomar just ignored the guard. IR carried on with his account until he reached the part about allowing the humans access to Zardathi technology. You let them copy our weapons and the hyperdrive? Lomar was shocked. You shouldn't have done that. Why not? They'd already copied the drive without asking. IR was tired of hearing he'd made one bad decision after another. Anger rose in him, reflected in the pitch of his voice, though he tried to suppress it. They can defend themselves against the Voth now and help us fight them. We couldn't win against the bloodsuckers for the Kiai. And now Haviertal is overrun, and here's Declain a wasteland. How many worlds will it take before you realise it's only if we all combine to fight them that we'll stamp out the Voth for once and for all? Lomar stared at him for a few thousandths, then spread his hands. I'm sorry, IR. You'll have to excuse me, he said. I just find this all very difficult to take in. I think about you 1,000 times every dark day. I wonder if you're even alive, and if you are, where you are and what you're doing, whether you have a partner and children of your own now, whether the Bekel still exists, and what happened to your mother. And now I wake up and you're here beside me, telling me Rilla's dead, that you grew up on another planet and you've taken all these decisions. I didn't even know the Bekel had left this system, much less been found. What am I supposed to think? He paused for a thousandth before adding, how did we get into the sleep room and find you? That's what I want to know. Eddie found and shorted out the circuits. Then you know what that means. No Zardothy child is safe in a sleep room. IR shifted his back against the fence. Not necessarily. Rilla had already been dead for 3 years when we were found. It took that long for the Bekel to drift into the human solar system. He paused. Eddie's my engineer. You've taken a human as a crew member. IR nodded at Eddie, who stood in a cluster with the other humans. He's over there. Eddie's hand rested on Lucy's blonde head. His other arm lay around Juliet's waist. For a moment, IR envied him, then remembered that his reunion with his family hadn't been exactly joyous. It's thanks to our human friends that we're alive now. He paused, then added, the thing is, Eddie can't go back to Earth now. We none of us can. Why not? We're all wanted for desertion from the Earth Space Forces. Lomar stared at him in shock for a few thousandths, then said, I don't believe I'm hearing this. You're a Zardothy, IR. Don't you know what that means? Devotion to duty, the willingness to carry out whatever task is set for you, no matter what your personal needs are. It's that has made us the sought-after fighters we are today. Above all, loyalty to one's clan, IR countered. I was brought up as a human, but I never forgot my duty to rescue my clan from the trouble they must be in. I schemed for years to get here. Nothing would stop me from finding you, eventually. He touched his father's sleeve and felt the torn leather against his fingers. I used to dream about this day, seeing you again, when I was in Russia and they wouldn't even let me join the army there. But the reality of being here is nothing like I imagined. His father's gaze clashed with his, but Lomar said nothing. Perhaps, IR thought, he doesn't know what to say. He wished at that thousandth that Hardy Brencher was beside him. He'd have known just what to say to persuade Lomar I did the right thing. Is Hardy even still alive? A whistle shrilled in the dusty air. Lomar got up. His movements were stiff and awkward. That's the call for the next mind shift, and I'm on it. I'll see you later. Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. That was probably the worst day of IR's life and probably Lomar's as well. But thank you very, very much. So I hope all you fab listeners enjoyed that, and many thanks to all our lovely authors and readers. And that's Helen, Terry, Eddie and Lucy for joining Colin and myself. And thank you so much to our lovely friends and family, studio audience, for joining us and supporting our readers today. If you'd like to stay and join our chat with the authors after we finish, you are most welcome to join us. That part won't be recorded or streamed, so if you put your video off, you can put it on again when I stop the stream and the video recording. Thank you.
Hello.
Authors, if you haven't yet done so, and I noticed just then that Eddie did, so fabulous. If you haven't yet done so, please include links to your books on Kindle, etc. in the chat, or send them to me afterwards, and I will post them on my timeline, in the Finger on the Pulse, on my YouTube channel, Helen Claire Gould, and on my website, www.zarduth.com. Do include prices, ISBNs or ASINs, where to get them, and your websites as well. This has been Helen Claire Gould comparing Fiction Fix Online and bringing both new and established authors in various fiction genres to your attention. Thank you so much for joining us. Colin and I will be back in Fiction Fix Online next month. The next edition is on Sunday, January the 9th, 2022. At 4 p.m. till about 5:10 p.m. and Colin and I look forward to catching up with you then. And Poetry Sandwich returned on Tuesday, and the video from it should be available. I'm a bit late posting it because I haven't been doing very much online this week, but the video from that will be posted on my YouTube channel, Helen Claire Gould. That will be back again on Tuesday, the 7th of December at 8 p.m. So watch out for the poster, which I'll put up on my timeline and in the Finger on the Pulse Facebook group. And please do try to join me. Just a quick note that I've had to change the dates of the writing crash course due to several health-related things impinging on my dates. So that will now run on the 22nd and 24th to 26th of November. So I just changed it, and I had a notification that I got my diabetic eye test, and you have to have drops put in your eyes, and you can't drive for about 6 hours, so it's a bit of a pain.
Yeah.
So these things are sent to try us. So bye for now, and I'm just going to finish the recording. And